Hey YNR fans! Welcome to YNR Trends, your young and the restless updates, shocking spoilers, and all the drama. So grab your coffee, hit that subscribe button, and let's dive right into Genoa City's hottest gossip. The hospital room was eerily quiet, the kind of silence that makes every breath and every heartbeat feel heavier than it should. Jill sat in the corner of the room, her hands gripping each other so tightly her knuckles had gone white. The monitors beeped steadily beside Billy's bed, but the sound did little to comfort her. Doctors had given her the statistic that had been playing on a loop inside her head since she first heard it, only 5% survival. She hated numbers, she hated odds, she hated statistics, because they had no soul, no understanding of who her son really was. Billy wasn't a number. He wasn't a chance or a percentage. He was her child, her boy, the one who had stumbled, fallen, gotten up, and fought harder than most. Yet here he was again, lying unconscious, and for the first time in a long time, Jill felt powerless in a way that shook her to her core. She pressed her hands to her face and broke into tears, the sobs wrenching out of her chest as she tried to muffle the sound so the nurses outside wouldn't hear. She wasn't ashamed of crying, not really, but it felt private. It was the kind of grief that couldn't be shared, the raw, maternal anguish that came from seeing your child hovering between life and death. The thought that Billy might not open his eyes, that she might never hear his sarcastic wit or watch him roll his eyes when she got on his case, was more than she could bear. She had been tough all her life. She had been called stubborn, controlling, dramatic, and worse, but none of that armor was worth anything now. Right now, she was just a mother begging the universe for mercy. Jill's mind wandered back through the years, every memory of Billy tumbling into her like an unstoppable flood. She remembered the times he had pushed her away, the fights they had, the nights she sat awake worrying when he spiraled into self-destructive choices. And she remembered the moments of laughter too, the smirk he gave her when he knew he'd won an argument, the surprising tenderness he showed when he thought no one was looking, the way he loved his children even when he doubted himself as a father. Those things were real, tangible, worth more than any statistic. They were the reasons she couldn't accept what the doctors had told her. She leaned forward, grabbing Billy's hand in hers. His skin was warm but limp, his fingers slack. "You listen to me," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You are not going to give up. You are not going to make me sit here and watch you slip away. Do you hear me, Billy? You've been through worse than this, you've beaten worse than this. 5% means nothing to you. You're my son, and you don't do things the easy way. You fight. You always fight." Her tears splashed onto his hand as she tightened her grip. The longer she sat there, the more the reality gnawed at her. She could put on a brave face for the world, but sitting here, alone with Billy, there was no escaping her fear. She thought about how fragile life really was, how quickly it could all unravel. She thought about the mistakes she had made as a mother, the regrets that came with years of strained relationships. She knew Billy had blamed her for things, and maybe he was right about some of them. But none of that mattered now. If she had to beg, she would. If she had to bargain with God, she would. If she had to trade places with him, she would do it without hesitation. The minutes dragged by like hours. Every flicker on the monitor made her chest tighten. Nurses came in and out, adjusting IVs, checking vitals, speaking in hushed voices as if volume itself could shatter what little hope was left. Jill hated the way they looked at her, with pity. She didn't want pity. She wanted answers, she wanted certainty, but most of all, she wanted Billy to open his eyes and prove them all wrong. In the stillness, she found herself talking to him again. "You have kids who need you. Johnny, Katie, they need their father. They've already been through enough. Don't you dare leave them behind, Billy. Don't you dare leave me behind either. I am not ready to say goodbye to you. Not now. Not ever. Her voice cracked, and the room felt heavier, as if grief itself had filled the air. Jill's emotions swung back and forth between anger and despair. She was furious at the circumstances that had landed Billy here. Furious that life had always seemed to test him more than others. Furious at him too, for all the reckless choices that had brought them to this point. But beneath that anger was fear, a fear so profound it shook her. Losing him would break something inside her that she knew could never be repaired. She had lost people before, but the thought of losing Billy was unbearable in a different way. It wasn't just about losing her son. It was about losing the part of herself that was bound up in him, the piece of her identity that was Billy's mother. She closed her eyes and let the memories keep coming, the good and the bad alike. She remembered Christmas mornings when he was little, his excitement lighting up the room. She remembered the long silences when he was older, when the distance between them felt insurmountable. She remembered the way he smiled when he actually let his guard down. Every piece of him was etched into her heart, and the idea that those things could become just memories instead of a living, breathing reality was unthinkable. Hours passed, though Jill barely noticed time moving. At one point, she laid her head on the edge of Billy's bed, her tears dampening the sheets. "Please," she whispered into the silence. "Just wake up. Just open your eyes and let me yell at you for scaring me half to death. I'll take that. I'll take anything if it means you're still here." Her voice wavered as she added, "I don't care what the doctors say. 5% is enough for me. It's enough for you. You've always been in the 5%, Billy. You've always been the one to beat the odds. Don't you dare prove me wrong now." As she sat there, Jill realized she wasn't just waiting for Billy to wake up. She was also waiting for herself, to find some strength, to believe that miracles still existed, to believe that her love for him could somehow tether him back to life. She couldn't accept anything less. The idea of leaving this hospital without him was something she refused to entertain. So she sat, she cried, she begged, and she waited, her whole world suspended in that fragile, unbearable uncertainty. The night wore on, and Jill's tears eventually gave way to quiet exhaustion. She sat still, her hand never leaving Billy's, watching every tiny movement as if it might be the sign she was waiting for. Hope and despair warred inside her, but one truth remained constant: she wasn't leaving his side. Not tonight. Not tomorrow. Not until he opened his eyes. And even if the odds were stacked against him, Jill knew her son. Billy Abbott didn't back down from a fight, and this time, he had more reason than ever to fight his way back. And so she sat in the dim light of the hospital room, her heart breaking but her resolve unshaken, clinging to that 5% survival like it was a lifeline. Because for Jill, 5% wasn't just a number, it was everything. It was a chance. It was hope. And for the love of her son, that was all she needed. The faint, antiseptic scent of the hospital room was a constant, oppressive presence, a smell that had become more familiar than home. It was a scent that promised cleanliness but delivered only the cold reality of mortality. Jill Foster, her usually impeccable composure in tatters, sat rigidly in the vinyl-upholstered chair beside the bed. Her hands, once capable of such firmness in a boardroom or such tenderness in a caress, were clenched into white-knuckled fists in her lap. The doctor's words, delivered with a practiced, somber neutrality just moments before, echoed in the silent chamber of her mind, each repetition a fresh wave of devastation. "We've done everything we can. The next 24 to 48 hours are critical. His chances. I'm sorry, Mrs. Williams, but we're looking at a 5% survival rate. 5%. The number was not just a statistic, it was a verdict. It was an almost certain death sentence wrapped in the thinnest, most cruel sliver of hope. It was a percentage so small it felt like a taunt, a mathematical way of saying prepare for the worst. The world, with all its complexities of power, fashion, and social standing in Genoa City, had shrunk to this single, sterile room and this terrifying number. All of Jill's formidable will, her famous ability to manipulate and manage any situation, was rendered utterly useless. She could not negotiate with a virus, could not intimidate a bacterial infection, could not buy her way out of the cellular war being lost within the man she loved. Her gaze was fixed on Billy Abbott. He was so still, so unnaturally pale against the stark white of the hospital pillows. The vibrant, often reckless energy that defined him was gone, replaced by the passive whir and beep of the machines that were now his lifeline. A ventilator breathed for him, its rhythmic hiss and fall a grotesque imitation of life. And 4 lines snaked from his arm, delivering fluids and antibiotics in a desperate, likely futile, battle. Monitors traced the faltering rhythm of his heart and the shallow tide of his oxygen saturation, their digital readouts a constant, anxiety-inducing reminder of his precarious hold on existence. This was not the Billy she knew. This was a shell, a body fighting a battle its spirit seemed to have already abandoned. It was the silence that was the most deafening. Billy was never silent. He was a man of words, charming words, angry words, foolish words, loving words. His voice, whether raised in laughter or in argument, had been the soundtrack to so much of her life, a life marked by its own tumultuous history. They had been through everything together: initial attraction, deep love, bitter betrayal, passionate reunions, and the shared, profound joy of building a family. Their relationship was a tapestry woven with threads of gold and thorns, a testament to the fact that the deepest loves are often the most complicated. He had driven her to the brink of madness with his impulsiveness, his addictions, his constant dance with self-destruction. Yet, he had also been her anchor in his own chaotic way, the one who saw past the formidable Jill Foster persona to the vulnerable woman beneath. Tears, which she had fought so hard to contain in the hallway, now welled in her eyes, blurring the image of his still form. A single, hot tear escaped, tracing a path down her cheek, followed by another. Then, the dam broke. Jill burst into tears. It was not a delicate, composed cry but a raw, guttural sob that seemed to be torn from the very core of her being. Her shoulders shook uncontrollably as she surrendered to the overwhelming tide of grief and fear. She buried her face in her hands, the sounds of her weeping the only human noise in the room, a stark counterpoint to the clinical symphony of the machines. This was a purging of every unsaid word, every moment of worry she had suppressed for the sake of appearing strong, every flicker of fear she had dismissed over the years as Billy navigated one crisis after another. She cried for the arguments they would never have, for the quiet moments of understanding they might never share again. She cried for their children, who might lose their father. She cried for the future they had planned, a future that now seemed like a cruel fantasy. The 5% was not just a measure of his chance to live, it was a measure of the chasm of loss that was about to engulf her entire world. In this moment, she was not a powerful businesswoman, not a matriarch of a powerful family, she was simply a woman watching the love of her life slip away, and she was utterly, terrifyingly powerless. Her mind became a chaotic slideshow of memories, each one a sharp, painful stab of contrast to the present stillness. She remembered a young, dashing Billy, full of devil-may-care charm, sweeping her off her feet. She remembered his laughter, a sound that could fill a room and, on occasion, could soothe her deepest anxieties. She remembered the feel of his hand in hers, the warmth and strength of it. She remembered the look in his eyes when their son, Johnny, was born, a look of pure, unadulterated joy and wonder. These memories were now like artifacts from a lost civilization, precious and painful reminders of what was being stolen. And intertwined with the love was the inevitable thread of regret. Had she been too hard on him? During his struggles with gambling, had her tough love sometimes crossed into coldness? In her efforts to protect him from himself, had she inadvertently pushed him away? The what-ifs and if-only swarmed her, a torment of hindsight that offered no solace, only a deeper level of anguish. The finality implied by the 5% statistic made every past disagreement feel tragically insignificant and every missed opportunity for tenderness feel like a monumental failure. Her weeping slowly subsided into ragged breaths and intermittent hiccups, leaving her exhausted, hollowed out. She wiped her face with the heels of her hands, a gesture that was both childlike and weary. The emotional storm had passed, leaving in its wake a profound and chilling clarity. The room came back into focus, the steady beep of the heart monitor, the hiss of the ventilator, the pale, still face of the man she adored. The 5% was still there. It had not changed. But something in Jill had. A new resolve began to crystallize within her, forged in the crucible of her despair. If this was truly the end, if these were to be their final hours together, she would not spend them in passive waiting. She would not let fear be the last thing she communicated to him. The doctors could quote their statistics, but they could not measure the human spirit. They could not quantify the power of love, however foolish that notion might seem in the face of medical science. That 5%, that tiny, almost invisible flicker of hope, was not a probability to be accepted, but a possibility to be fought for. It was a battle she could not fight for him physically, but she could fight it with him spiritually. She leaned forward, her movements slow and deliberate, and gently took his limp, cool hand in both of hers. She ignored the 4-tube, focusing only on the connection of skin against skin. It was a physical anchor, a way to bridge the gap between his unconscious world and hers. "Billy," she whispered, her voice hoarse from crying but filled with a new, fierce intensity. "Billy, can you hear me? It's Jill." She paused, as if giving him time to process her voice in the depths of his coma. "I'm here. I'm right here, and I'm not going anywhere. You have to listen to me now. You have to fight. Do you hear me? You have to fight." She began to talk to him, not in the desperate, pleading tone of before, but with a steady, compelling force. She spoke of their life together, not with the sadness of remembrance, but with the passion of affirmation. She reminded him of the time he stood up to his brother, Jack, to protect a business deal they believed in. She recounted the story of their wedding day, focusing on the moment he stumbled over his vows, not from nerves, but from overwhelming emotion, and how everyone in the church had been moved to tears. She talked about their children, about Johnny's latest baseball game and Katie's budding artistic talent, weaving a tapestry of a life that was still very much alive and waiting for him. "They need you, Billy," she said, her voice gaining strength. "I need you. This family is not complete without you. Your story isn't over. It can't be. You've never been a man who accepts the odds. You've always defied them. This is just one more fight. The most important one." She squeezed his hand, trying to transmit her own strength, her own will to live, through that simple touch. "Don't you dare give up. Don't you dare listen to anyone who tells you it's too hard. You are Billy Abbott. You are stronger than this. Come back to me. Come back to us." This was no longer just a vigil, it was a summoning. Jill was using the only weapon she had left, the power of their shared history, the force of her love, and the sheer, stubborn refusal to accept a future without him in it. She was talking him back from the brink, painting a picture of a life worth fighting for, a life that was vibrant and real and waiting just on the other side of this darkness. The 5% was no longer a death knell, in her mind, it had become a challenge. It was the small, stubborn core of Billy's own fighting spirit that she believed was still in there, and she was determined to fan it into a flame. The hours stretched on, marked only by the changing shifts of nurses who moved with quiet efficiency, their sympathetic smiles doing little to ease the tension. Jill remained at her post, her voice growing softer but never wavering in its determination. She talked until her throat was dry, she prayed silent prayers to any deity that might be listening, and she waited. She waited for any sign, a flicker of an eyelid, a twitch of a finger, any indication that he was hearing her, that he was joining the fight. The scene was a profound exploration of the human condition when faced with the abyss. It laid bare the utter helplessness that comes when love confronts a crisis that cannot be solved by money, influence, or even sheer force of will. Jill's tears were a necessary catharsis, the acknowledgement of a potential loss so vast it threatened to obliterate her own identity. But her subsequent actions revealed a deeper truth about love and hope. Hope, in its most potent form, is not the naive belief that everything will be fine. It is the deliberate, courageous decision to fight for a desired outcome even when the evidence suggests it is impossible. It is the choice to stand in the darkness and affirm light. Jill, in waiting for Billy to wake up, was not passively hoping, she was actively hoping. She was creating a space for a miracle, not by denying the grim reality, but by defiantly asserting an alternative one. The only 5% survival was the objective, external reality imposed by science. But the internal reality, the world she was building with her words and her touch in that quiet room, was one of 100% commitment, 100% love, and a refusal to surrender. The ultimate question hanging over the scene was not just whether Billy would physically survive, but whether the power of that love could truly act as a lifeline, pulling him back from a statistical certainty toward a miraculous recovery. The tension of the narrative rests entirely on that fragile, beautiful, and terrifying possibility.